He thought she was a monster, horned, feared, and from the species that destroyed his world. But when she saved his life, everything changed. In a galaxy torn by war and lies, a wounded human scientist and an exiled alien warrior must survive. Together, uncover the truth and challenge everything their people believe. What starts as fear becomes trust. What begins in chaos could ignite peace, but only if they dare to see each other for who they truly are. If you are new here then, please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. Dr. Rowan Hale had never seen space look so violent. One moment, he was scanning data from a gravitational anomaly in a peaceful sector of the galaxy, and the next, alarms blared through the corridors of the Nexa Orion, the research ship he called home for the last 4 months. Explosions shook the metal walls, throwing him off his feet. Emergency lights flashed red, painting everything in chaos. Through the window, he saw dark shapes closing in, ships that didn't match any friendly signature. Whoever they weren't here to talk. The research team was caught completely off guard. They were scientists, not soldiers. Rowan shouted for his crew over the comms, but all he heard was static. Somewhere in the confusion, he thought of Dr. Mira, his closest friend and the team's lead botanist. She'd been in the greenhouse lab when the first blast hit. He called her name again and again, but there was no reply. Smoke filled the corridor as he stumbled toward the escape pod bay. A warning siren shrieked above him. "Structural breach detected. Evacuate immediately," the computer voice repeated. Rowan reached the last pod as another explosion rocked the vessel. Fire and debris rained down behind him. Without hesitation, he slammed his palm onto the launch pad. The pod's doors sealed, and the world outside vanished. Through the tiny window of the escape pod, he saw the Nexa Orion torn apart in the vacuum of space. 29 crew members, all gone. Only he had escaped. His pod sped toward the nearest moon, Virella 7. Known for its rough terrain and thick mineral crust, it had no recorded settlements. As the pod entered the atmosphere, systems began to fail. Sparks flew from the console, and the controls became unresponsive. Warning lights flared across the dashboard, but Rowan could do nothing except brace for impact. The crash was brutal. Metal screeched against rock as the pod slammed into the surface. Pain exploded through his body, and then everything went black. When Rowan opened his eyes again, the world around him was strange and dim. He wasn't in the pod anymore. The cold, sharp angles of metal had been replaced by stone walls that glowed with soft blue light. His body ached. Something wrapped around his chest, holding him in place. Bandages. His side throbbed with every breath. Then he heard a voice. "Don't move. Your bones are still healing." It was a calm voice. Steady, rich, and low. A voice not quite human. Rowan turned his head slowly toward the speaker and froze. Standing just a few feet away was a tall figure unlike anything he'd seen before. Her skin was a deep, stormy blue, and 2 curved horns rose from her forehead, marked with amber-colored rings. Her eyes, a glowing crimson, watched him carefully. Hair the color of silver moonlight flowed down her back, braided and tied with small pieces of metal. Her appearance was fierce, alien, powerful, and unmistakably dangerous. Fear surged through him. Everything he had ever read about the Rokari species came rushing back, merciless, territorial, and deeply hostile to outsiders. He tried to sit up, ignoring the pain. His hand fumbled on the ground and grabbed a jagged piece of stone. He held it out in front of him with shaking hands. "Stay back," he said through dry lips. "Don't come any closer." The woman didn't move. Instead, she crouched slowly and placed a container of water on the ground between them. Then she stepped back. "If I wanted you dead, human, you would not have woken up." Rowan hesitated. Her voice didn't carry hatred, just certainty. She wasn't threatening him. She was stating a fact. Still, he kept the stone close. "Your pod crashed 3 days ago," she continued. You were badly hurt, I brought you here. His thoughts raced. 3 days? Had she been caring for him all that time? Why? Everything he'd learned said the Rokari didn't take prisoners, let alone help injured enemies. My ship, he muttered, testing her story. You attacked us. Her eyes narrowed. Not me, not my people, not anymore. She looked away, and for the first time, Rowan noticed the cave's walls more carefully. They weren't just stone. Wires and panels had been woven into the rock. Pieces of advanced tech mixed with handmade tools. Whoever she was, she'd been surviving here for a long time. Why save me? He asked, still holding the stone. Because life is rare, she said, kneeling outside his reach. And because you might be useful, your ship's attackers sent patrols. If they find your pod, they'll find this place. And us. Rowan's. Mind churned. He didn't trust her, but he didn't have many options either. What's your name? He asked. I am Sinara. He repeated it awkwardly. Rowan Hale. Was a scientist, studying planetary physics. Sinara raised a brow. Then you'd best study survival, because you won't last long here without help. A sudden roar echoed above the cave, deep and rhythmic. Ships. They're here, she said, grabbing a weapon from the wall. Rowan tried to stand. Pain lanced through his leg. Who's here? The ones who will kill us both if they find us. Despite everything, Rowan reached out and took the walking stick she handed him. He didn't trust her, but she had saved his life. And for now, that was enough. Rowan Hale moved through the strange world of Varela 7 with every step a reminder of his injuries. His leg throbbed, his ribs ached, and the cold air made each breath sharp. But he didn't stop. Not with Sinara leading the way. She moved like she belonged to the shadows. Silent, careful and alert. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, watching for movement. Rowan had spent most of his life in clean labs, surrounded by technology and data. Now he was limping across, alien ground with an exile who had once been called a beast. The sky above was dark, heavy with clouds that glowed faintly from the twin moons. The terrain was unforgiving. Jagged rocks, narrow paths, and deep ravines made each step a risk. Sinara hardly spoke unless it was to give a warning or a direction. When she did speak, her voice was low and steady. Stay close, the Rokari. Scouts don't travel alone, she said, her eyes locked on the distant ridges. They traveled through the night, pausing only when Rowan's body couldn't take another step. He collapsed by a cluster of rocks, gasping for air. Sinara didn't scold him. She simply crouched beside him, handing over a pouch of water and a dry nutrient bar. We're still far from safe ground, she said. But rest for a few minutes. Rowan looked at her as she scanned the darkness. In the firelight of a small heat stone she'd activated, her features seemed less fierce and more human. The sharp lines of her face softened slightly, and the crimson glow in her eyes dimmed in the warmth. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like someone who had lost more than she let on. Why are you helping me? Rowan asked, the question finally slipping out. Sinara didn't look at him. Because I was alone for too long, and because I saw your crash. If I hadn't pulled you from the wreck, you'd be bones by now. He gave a small nod. Still, thank you. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of something softer. Later, as they walked again, a distant sound made them both freeze. A low growl echoed across the rocks. Sinara raised a hand to stop him, her fingers resting lightly on the blade at her hip. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything Rowan had studied, tall as a human, with 6 legs and skin like smooth stone. Its white eyes were blind, but its nose twitched rapidly. Don't move, Sinara whispered. It hunts by sound and scent. The creature sniffed the air, turning toward them. Without warning, it charged. Rowan acted on instinct. He pushed Sinara aside and swung his walking stick. It hit the beast's snout with a crack, buying a moment, but claws raked across his arm. Pain shot through him as blood spilled down his sleeve. Sinara sprang into action. She moved with deadly grace, slicing across the creature's neck in 2 swift strikes. The beast collapsed without another sound. Sonara turned on him, her voice sharp. "Why did you do that?" "You're injured. I could have handled it." "You weren't the target," he said, clutching his arm. "It was coming for you. I'm Rokari. I'm built to fight. And I'm human," he said through gritted teeth. "We protect our friends." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she tore a strip of cloth from her gear and wrapped his wound without a word. Her hands were gentle, careful despite the tension in her body. They sheltered that night in a shallow cave beneath an overhang. The wind outside howled like a beast of its own, but inside the air was still. Rowan winced as he lay back, the pain from his injuries spreading like fire through his side. Sonara sat nearby, checking her weapons. Then, without looking at him, she began to speak. "My home was filled with trees taller than starships," she said. "We called them sky roots. During the bloom season, their leaves turned silver. They glowed under our moons." Rowan listened in silence. Her voice was different, now softer, almost wistful. "You miss it," he said gently. "As you miss Earth," she replied. He nodded. "Every day." She turned toward him, eyes glowing faintly. "Do your people always see others as threats?" "Not always," he said. "But fear is easy. Understanding takes work." Sonara stared at the small flames of the heat stone. "When you first saw me, you reached for a weapon." "I was wrong," Rowan admitted. She looked up at him. "And now?" "You're not a beast," he said, voice quiet. "You're something else." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened again just for a second. They didn't speak much after that. They simply rested, surrounded by alien stars and the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. Tomorrow would bring more danger. But, for tonight, in this quiet moment, a new understanding had begun. The sky over Varela 7 had turned a pale blue-gray by the time Rowan and Sonara reached the abandoned relay tower. The tall structure stood like a broken monument in the middle of cracked stone and twisted roots, its antenna bent slightly, weathered by time and dust storms. They had walked for days, moving through deep ravines and over sharp hills, hiding from patrols and wild creatures, their bond growing slowly in quiet moments between danger. Rowan's injuries had faded into a dull ache, and he no longer stumbled as he had before. He was stronger now, not just because of recovery, but because of who walked beside him. Sonara checked the area with sharp eyes before they approached the base of the tower. "Looks quiet," she said, "but we don't have much time. Once the signal goes out, they'll know we're here." Rowan nodded and followed her through the rusted doorway. Inside, the walls hummed faintly with forgotten energy. He moved quickly to the terminal at the far end and brushed dust from the interface. His fingers danced across the screen, activating systems that hadn't been touched in years. As lights flickered on, Sonara stood watch, blade in hand, scanning the horizon through the doorway. "I can't reach Earth directly," Rowan muttered, his eyes focused on the scrolling data. "But I think I can use the emergency channels. I just need to boost the signal long enough to send a message." As he worked, something unexpected appeared on the screen. Rows of encrypted transmissions marked with military tags. Rowan paused, his brow furrowing. He tapped a few more keys, unlocking the hidden code. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Sonara," he called. "You need to see this." She walked over, her expression curious. He turned the screen toward her, showing lines of communication between Rokari leaders. "These aren't just patrol orders," Rowan said. "They're battle plans. And look at this. Coordinates, attack confirmations, even forged territory claims." Sonara leaned in closer, reading the symbols carefully. Her face darkened. "These are the same lies that led to my exile," she said. "They forged documents just like these to make it look like I betrayed the council." Rowan clicked into another file. "They knew where our research ship would be. This wasn't a mistake. This was a trap." A long silence fell between them as the truth settled in. The attack on his team hadn't been a random act of war. It had been planned, used as an excuse to stir fear, provoke conflict. and silence anyone who might get in the way. This symbol, Rowan pointed to a personal seal at the bottom of a command file, belongs to someone high up, right? Sinara's eyes narrowed. It belongs to Kalir, my cousin. He was the one who took my place after I was exiled. Then he's behind this, Rowan said. He started a war. He killed my team. And he destroyed your life. Sinara stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. If I can show this to the council, they might believe me. They might end this before more blood is spilled. Rowan nodded. Then we need to get this data out. But before they could move, a sharp alarm beeped from the terminal. Rowan's heart dropped. They've detected the signal, he said. We've got company. Outside, the sound of engines roared closer. Sinara grabbed Rowan's arm and pulled him toward a maintenance tunnel she had noticed earlier. This way, she said. We can lose them in the ruins. They ran through the tunnel as the ground shook behind them. Explosions echoed through the relay tower, and dust filled the air. Rowan stumbled once, but Sinara caught him. When they reached the exit, they climbed up a rocky slope and looked back. The tower was gone, fire pouring from its remains. They really don't want this truth getting out, Rowan said, catching his breath. Sinara looked down at the data crystal he had saved before the blast. Then we must protect this with our lives. They pushed forward, heading toward the ancient ruins where Sinara believed old technology could help them. As night fell again, they took shelter in a crumbling temple filled with strange carvings and faded symbols. The air was still and quiet. Sitting by a small flame, Rowan turned to Sinara. All my life I was told your kind was savage, cruel, something to be feared. But now I know better. She didn't respond right away. Then she said softly, I was taught that humans were weak, selfish, and untrustworthy. But now I see something else. Rowan looked at her. You're not a beast, Sinara. You're brave, you're loyal, you're beautiful. The word hung in the air, almost unsure of itself. Sinara turned her face toward him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen. No one's ever called me that. He reached out, gently brushing a silver strand of her hair behind one horn. Then it's long overdue. Their eyes met, and in that silence something new bloomed. Uncertain, unspoken, but real. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For the first time in days, Rowan felt something other than fear or pain. He felt hope. The ruins were older than anything Rowan had ever seen. Stone arches stretched high into the sky, their surfaces marked with symbols no one had translated in centuries. The place felt sacred, even silent, as if the ancient builders had vanished only moments before. Sinara moved ahead, her steps careful, leading him through narrow halls and open chambers filled with glowing crystals and strange energy. Somewhere in the center of it all, she believed they would find what they needed, technology from a time before either of their species walked the stars. They reached a chamber that pulsed with soft blue light. In the center stood a pedestal holding a group of crystal devices, each one humming with hidden power. Rowan approached slowly, heart pounding. This has to be it, he whispered. If these still work, they could hold everything. Proof of Kalir's plans, records of the attack, and even the false documents used to frame you. Sinara stood beside him, watching as he connected his small data unit to one of the crystals. A wave of light passed through the room, and then the crystal projected images, Rukari ships, council symbols, voice transmissions, and battle maps. One by one, the lies unraveled. The truth played out in full, impossible to deny. But the moment didn't last. A sudden sound, boots on stone, echoed down the corridor. They turned just as a squad of Rukari soldiers stormed into the room, weapons raised. They found us, Rowan said, pulling Sinara behind the pedestal. She pulled her blade and crouched low. There's no time to run. We stand and fight. The battle was loud and fast. Rowan used what he could, chunks of broken stone, flashes of light from the crystals, anything to distract or block their enemies. Sinara moved with grace and fury, protecting him as he worked to extract the data and secure it on a smaller device. Blasts rang out, echoing off the stone walls. They were outnumbered, but they fought with purpose. Then a shot hit Sinara in the side. She stumbled back, falling hard against the wall. Rowan ran to her side, catching her before she fell completely. "Stay with me," he begged, hands shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding. She handed him the crystal. "You have to. Take this. Get it to the council. They need to see." "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. Sinara's breath was short. "Then we go together. But I won't make it far like this." Rowan looked around. There was only one option left. "Your people. They have a settlement not far from here, right? You told me once. They'll kill you on sight," she said, voice faint. "They can try," he replied, lifting her carefully into his arms. He moved fast, guided by memory and instinct. The settlement was built into the cliffs, a blend of stone and living metal that shimmered under the sun. Guards spotted him long before he reached the gate. They raised weapons, shouting commands in a language he barely understood. Then he said the words Sinara had taught him, a plea for sanctuary. His accent was broken, but it was enough. The guards hesitated, then led him into a healing hall, where others took Sinara from his arms. He wasn't allowed to follow. Hours passed, and Rowan waited alone in a quiet chamber, surrounded by strange plants and glowing walls. He didn't know if she would survive. He didn't know if he would either. But he stayed. When a healer finally entered, she gave a small nod. "She lives," the woman said. Relief swept over him so fast it almost knocked him to the ground. But peace was short-lived. Within the day, Rowan was taken to a large hall where the council waited. Kalir stood at the front, wrapped in ceremonial robes, his eyes cold. "This human is a spy," Kalir said, his voice loud. "He should be executed for his crimes." Rowan stood his ground. "I bring proof of Kalir's lies," he said. "Evidence that he started this war and destroyed innocent lives." Some on the council listened. Others frowned. It wasn't enough. Then the doors opened, and Sinara entered. Her steps were slow, but her back was straight. "He speaks the truth," she said, her voice strong. "And I have more." They presented the crystal. The council watched as the images unfolded. Kalir's voice, the faked orders, the attack plans. The hall was silent when the projection ended. Kalir shouted that it was a trick, that the technology was fake. But one of the elders stood and said calmly, "This is Forerunner tech. It cannot lie." The council voted. Kalir was removed from power. Sinara was cleared of all charges. Rowan was offered a choice: leave and return to Earth, or stay and become the first human diplomat to the Rokari. He chose to stay. Weeks later, Rowan and Sinara stood together on a quiet balcony overlooking the cliffs. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. She wore new robes now, her position restored, her dignity returned. He still wore his old clothes, patched and worn, but he stood taller now. "There are still laws," Sinara said softly, "rules that keep us apart." Rowan reached for her hand. "Then we'll change them." She looked at him for a long time, then smiled. "One day. Maybe." They stood there in silence, the wind brushing past, carrying with it the sound of a new beginning. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just for survival, but for something more.